Each day, a little girl went alone to the well for her ill mother, until a cowboy asked, "Are you alone?" In a small, forgotten corner of the western frontier, where the wind always carried dust and the roads were mostly empty, there was a little town that seemed to be slowly disappearing from the map. The houses were old, the wooden fences were broken in many places, and most of the people had already left to find better lives somewhere else. But in this quiet and fading town, there was one small child who still stayed. Her name was Lila. Lila was a thin, soft-spoken girl with tired eyes that looked older than her age. She lived in a small wooden house at the edge of the town with her mother. Her father had passed away years ago, and since then life had never been easy for them, but things became even harder when her mother fell ill and could no longer work or walk properly. From that time, Lila became the one who took care of everything. Every morning, before the sun even touched the hills, Lila would wake up quietly. She would make sure her mother was resting, then take 2 old metal buckets and leave the house without making any noise. She did not want to wake her mother or worry her. Her daily journey always led her to the same place, the old well outside the town. The well was not close. It was a long walk through dry land, with sand that made every step heavier. The path was quiet, and sometimes the wind would move across the empty fields like a whisper. Lila would walk carefully, holding the buckets tightly in her small hands. The buckets were almost bigger than her arms, but she never complained. She had learned not to. When she reached the well, she would stand for a moment and look around. There was usually no one there, only silence, the sound of wind, and the old wooden structure of the well creaking slightly as it moved. Lila would lower the rope slowly, pull up the water, and fill her buckets. It was hard work, but she had done it so many times that her hands remembered every movement. Sometimes she would pause and look at the water as it moved inside the bucket. She often thought about how something so simple like water could feel so heavy when life itself was already heavy. After filling the buckets, she would begin her walk back home. The journey back always felt longer. Her arms would hurt, and the sun would slowly rise higher, making the heat stronger. But she never stopped. She always thought about her mother waiting at home. "She needs me," Lila would whisper to herself sometimes, even if no one else was around to hear. The town people knew Lila. Everyone had seen her walking alone every day. Some felt sorry for her, but most were too busy with their own struggles to help. Life in the frontier was not kind, and people often learned to focus only on surviving their own days. No one stopped her to ask if she needed help. No one offered to carry her buckets. It was as if everyone accepted her lonely routine as something normal. But Lila did not know any different. She believed this was just how life was. One morning, something small changed. As she reached the well, she felt a strange feeling. It was not fear exactly, but it was the feeling of being noticed. She stopped for a moment and looked around slowly. The wind was still there. The land was still empty. But for a second, she thought she was not alone. She held her buckets a little tighter and quickly continued her work. After filling them, she hurried back home faster than usual, her small footsteps kicking up dust behind her. That evening, when the sun began to set and the sky turned orange, a stranger arrived at the edge of the town. He was a cowboy. He wore a worn hat that had seen many journeys, and his clothes carried the dust of long roads. His horse moved slowly, as if both man and animal were tired from travel. The cowboy did not speak much as he entered the town. He simply looked around, observing the empty streets and quiet houses. Something about the place felt different to him. As he tied his horse near an old post, his eyes moved toward the direction of the well far outside the town. He did not know why, but he felt like something important was happening there. And so, under the fading light of the day, the cowboy stood still for a moment, watching the empty road that led toward the well, as if he was waiting for something he had not yet understood. The next morning arrived quietly in the small frontier town. The air was cool, and a light wind moved through the empty streets. Most people were still asleep, and even the sun had not fully risen yet. The town looked the same as always, quiet, tired, and almost forgotten by time. But something had changed. The stranger who arrived the day before, the cowboy named Jonah, was already awake. He had spent the night in a small stable room offered by a local man. It was not comfortable, but Jonah was used to simple places. He did not need much. He only needed a place to rest and think. Jonah was not like other travelers. He did not speak much, but he noticed everything. He had seen many towns before, but this one felt different. There was a strange silence here, not just from emptiness, but from something unspoken. Early that morning, he decided to walk around. As he stepped outside, the wooden boards of the street creaked under his boots. He adjusted his hat and looked toward the open land beyond the town. Something pulled his attention in that direction again, the same feeling he had felt the night before. He began walking. Without asking anyone for directions, he followed the dirt path leading out of town. The ground was dry, and small stones shifted under his steps. The farther he walked, the quieter everything became. And then, in the distance, he saw it. The well. It stood alone in the open land, surrounded by nothing but dust and silence. It was old, with wooden beams that looked worn by time. A rope hung loosely from the wheel, and the bucket below moved slightly with the wind. Jonah stopped for a moment. He did not know why, but he felt like this place carried more meaning than it showed. He stood there quietly, watching. After a short while, he noticed movement in the distance. A small figure was walking toward the well. It was Lila. She was carrying her 2 buckets, just like every other morning. Her steps were slow but steady. She looked small against the wide land around her. Jonah watched as she came closer, not saying anything. When she reached the well, she did not notice him at first. She placed the buckets down carefully and began preparing the rope. Jonah stayed back, not wanting to scare her, but after a moment, he stepped forward slightly. Lila froze. Her hands stopped moving. Slowly, she turned her head and saw him, a stranger standing near the well. Her eyes widened a little, unsure of what to think. Jonah raised his hand slightly in a calm gesture. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said softly. Lila did not answer. There was silence between them for a moment, only the sound of wind passing through the dry land. Jonah looked at her buckets, then at her small hands. He noticed how tired she looked, even though she was just a child. Something about it did not feel right to him. After a moment, he asked gently, "Are you alone out here?" The question was simple, but it made Lila stop completely. No one had ever asked her that before. She looked at him carefully, unsure if she should trust him. People in her life rarely asked questions with kindness. Most questions brought trouble or pity, and she had learned to avoid both. "Yes," she said quietly after a pause. Her voice was soft, almost like she was not used to speaking much. Jonah looked around the empty land again. There was no house nearby except one far in the distance. No adult was with her. Only a child and heavy buckets. He did not say anything for a moment. He just watched her carefully, as if trying to understand the situation without making her uncomfortable. Lila slowly turned back to the well and began lowering the rope again, acting as if the moment had not happened. But her hands were slightly shaking now. Jonah stayed where he was. He did not leave. He did not interrupt her again. He simply watched as she pulled up the water, struggling a little with the weight. Something inside him felt uneasy. He had seen many hard lives on the road, but seeing a child alone like this every day felt different. It was not just about work. It felt like something was missing in her world. After she filled her buckets, Lila lifted them carefully again. She looked like she was preparing to leave quickly, like she always did. Jonah finally spoke again. "If you ever need help with those," he said, "you don't have to carry them alone." Lila paused for a second but did not respond. She just tightened her grip on the buckets and started walking back toward the town. Jonah watched her leave. As her small figure disappeared into the dusty path, he stood still near the well. The wind moved around him, but his thoughts stayed on the girl. He looked at the empty land again. Something was not right here. And for the first time since arriving in this town, Jonah felt like he had a reason to stay longer than planned. The next morning came with a soft, pale light over the frontier town. The sky was clear, but the land still looked dry and tired, as if it had been waiting for rain that never came. The streets of the town were quiet again, and most people stayed inside their homes. But Jonah was already awake. Since the day before, he could not stop thinking about the little girl he had seen at the well. Something about her life did not feel right to him. He had traveled through many places, seen many struggles, but this was different. It was not just hardship. It felt like neglect that everyone had learned to ignore, so he decided to return to the well. He walked the same path again, the dry ground crunching under his boots. The wind was light, but it carried dust through the empty fields. As he got closer to the well, he slowed down, watching carefully. And there she was. Lila had already arrived. She was doing the same work as always, lifting the rope, pulling water, filling the buckets. Her small arms moved with practice, but there was a clear tiredness in her body. She looked like she had not rested properly in a long time. Jonah stood at a distance for a moment, watching quietly. He did not want to scare her again, but this time, he stepped forward more gently. Lila noticed him quickly. Her hand stopped again, but she did not step back. She only looked at him with cautious eyes. Jonah raised his hand slightly. "I came back," he said softly. "I didn't want you to be alone while working." Lila did not answer right away. She looked down at her buckets, then at the rope in her hands. She seemed unsure of what to say. Most people in her life either ignored her or told her to hurry. Kindness from strangers was something she did not fully trust yet. Jonah slowly walked closer to the well. He did not touch anything. He simply stood near her side. "Let me help," he said. Before she could refuse, Jonah took one of the buckets after it was filled. It was heavy, but he lifted it easily. Then he helped pull the second one up. Lila watched him quietly. She did not stop him this time. For the first time in many days, she did not carry everything alone. They stood in silence for a moment after filling the buckets. The wind passed between them, but the silence felt different now, not empty, but calm. As they worked, Jonah spoke gently again. "You shouldn't be doing all of this alone every day," he said. Lila looked at him, then at the ground. "I have to," she replied softly. "My mother is sick." Her voice was small but honest. Jonah stayed quiet for a moment. He understood a little more now. "Where is your father?" he asked carefully. Lila did not answer right away. Her eyes lowered further. "He is gone," she said after a pause. That was all she said. Jonah did not ask more questions. He could see that talking about it was not easy for her. Instead, he looked at the direction of the town and then back at her. "That still doesn't mean you should carry everything alone," he said. Lila did not respond, but she did not move away either. After a while, Jonah helped her place the filled buckets on her small wooden cart. It made the journey back easier. Lila noticed the difference immediately. The weight was still there, but not as painful as before. As they began walking back toward the town, Lila walked slightly beside him, not ahead like before. The road felt longer, but also less heavy. For the first time, Lila spoke a little more. "My mother sleeps most of the day," she said quietly. "Sometimes she cannot even get up." Jonah listened carefully. "No one helps you?" he asked. Lila shook her head slightly. "People are busy," she said simply. Jonah did not reply immediately. He looked at the town in the distance. The buildings looked old, quiet, and almost lifeless. He understood now why things were like this, but he did not accept it. When they reached near Lila's home, she stopped. Jonah also stopped. He looked at the small wooden house. It looked weak, like it had not been repaired in a long time. The place felt too quiet for a child and a sick mother. Jonah turned to her. "I won't always be here," he said honestly. "But I won't ignore this either." Lila looked at him, unsure what he meant. Jonah continued. "I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll make sure you don't carry everything alone again." Lila did not know what to say. No one had ever made her such a promise before. She slowly nodded, but still looked uncertain. Then she turned and went inside her home. Jonah stood outside for a moment longer. He watched the door close. The wind moved again across the empty street. But now, something had changed. He was no longer just a stranger passing through. He had seen something he could not walk away from. And as he turned back toward the well, he made a quiet decision in his mind. He would return every day if needed. Because now, the little girl at the well was no longer invisible to him. The days after that felt different in the small frontier town. Nothing big changed at first. The wind still moved through the empty streets, and the old buildings still stood quietly under the sun. But for Lila, something in her daily life had begun to shift in a way she could feel but not fully explain. Jonah kept his promise. Every morning before the sun rose too high, he was at the well. He did not take control of Lila's work, and he never forced her to step aside. Instead, he simply helped her carry the water, lift the buckets, and make the long walk easier. At first, Lila stayed quiet. She was not used to someone returning again and again just to help. But slowly, she stopped feeling afraid of his presence. Then, little by little, she began to trust it. Jonah also started noticing more about her life. Her house was small and weak. The roof had parts that let in dust. Inside, everything was simple and worn. Lila's mother stayed in bed most of the time, her condition making her too weak to move freely. Lila tried her best to take care of her, but it was clear she was carrying too much for someone her age. Jonah realized that water from the well was only part of the problem. The real problem was that no one in the town had stepped in to help them at all. One morning, after helping Lila again, Jonah did not leave immediately. He stood in the town and began speaking to a few people. At first, most avoided the topic. Some looked uncomfortable, while others said they had their own problems. But Jonah did not stop. He calmly explained what he had seen. How a small girl was carrying water every day alone, how her mother was sick without proper care, and how the town had quietly ignored it for too long. At first, people were silent. Then slowly, something changed. An old shopkeeper finally spoke up and admitted he had seen Lila struggle many times but never thought deeply about it. Another woman said she had herbs that might help the sick mother. A few others began to listen more carefully. It was not sudden. It was slow and uncertain. But it was movement. Jonah then arranged for a traveling healer who sometimes passed through nearby towns. It took time to bring him, but eventually, the healer arrived and went to Lila's house. Inside the small home, the healer checked her mother carefully. Lila stood nearby, holding her breath, afraid of what she might hear. After a long moment, the healer said something that gave her hope. With proper care, rest, and medicine, her mother could slowly recover. It was not instant. It would take time. But it was possible. For Lila, those words felt like light entering a dark room. In the following weeks, things began to improve little by little. Her mother slowly regained strength. Some days she could sit up. Later, she could speak more clearly. Lila watched all of it carefully, as if afraid it might disappear if she blinked. Jonah still came every morning, but now his help was not just about water. He helped repair small parts of their home. He brought supplies from town. Sometimes he simply checked if they needed anything. Lila began to smile more often. It was small at first, like something she had forgotten how to do. But it became more natural over time. The town also began to change slowly. People who once ignored the family now sometimes brought food or asked if help was needed. It was not perfect, but it was no longer silence. There was attention now. There was care. One evening, after many days had passed, Lila stood outside her house with Jonah. The sun was setting, painting the sky in warm colors. The wind was calm, and the town felt peaceful in a way it had not before. Lila looked toward the well in the distance. Then she turned to Jonah. "Are you going to leave soon?" she asked quietly. Jonah was silent for a moment. He looked at the horizon, then at the town, then at Lila. He had been a traveler for most of his life. Moving from place to place was what he knew best. But something about this place was different now. It was no longer just a stop on the road. It felt like somewhere he belonged, even if he had not planned it. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I think I'll stay a while longer." Lila looked at him, surprised but happy in a quiet way. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was facing life alone. That night, the wind passed gently over the town. The well stood quietly in the distance, but it no longer felt like a place of struggle. It felt like a beginning. And in that small, forgotten town, where everything once felt empty, life slowly started to feel full again. Not because everything became perfect, but because someone finally chose not to walk away.